Two of the hottest topics in the city are always education in the Framingham Public Schools and local city government. How are they serving you, and how are they affecting education, quality of life, and your pocketbook living in Framingham? What are the latest issues? Well, that's what we'll be talking about during this hour. Phil Ottaviani, who's the chair of the Framingham City Council, he'll be joining me after my first guest, Dr. Robert Tremblay, Superintendent of the Framingham Public Schools. Welcome, Dr. Tremblay. It's so nice to have you back on the show. You're great about coming on and talking about all the issues that people want to hear about.
Thanks so much for the invitation. I always appreciate it.
Well, we have a lot to cover today.
We always do.
You know, one of the things I did when I knew you were joining me today was I talked to a lot of parents and just kind of got some feedback on what are some of the issues that are on people's minds. And one of the more common topics that kept coming up was this topic about the busing.
Yeah.
We know that Framingham has its challenges in this school year and has had challenges over the last few years with busing. So what I really wanted to get to today was the core of where that whole situation stands, and is it locked in where it's going to be for the rest of the year? Is there any chance of it getting any better? Because people are saying we have maybe like 57 buses or 60, and we're supposed to have like 67 buses. Other districts have full busing and fully staffed buses. Where do we stand with the buses?
Sure. Well, let's try to make some just a general understanding of how it works. We have a contract for 77 buses. We have actually, on a good day, 57 drivers. So we're about 20 drivers short for the buses that we need. That being said, though, we provide transportation to all eligible riders. So there's an eligibility under the Massachusetts general law and under school committee policy that, so really from ages kindergarten through grade 6, we provide transportation within, beyond 2 miles or 1.5 miles respectively. But for grades, middle school and up, there's really no obligation to provide transportation. That being said, we have a rich history here of providing transportation to everybody who needs it, and 77 buses would allow us to do that. So we have this delta of 20 buses, and we're making the best we can do with what we have, but we are providing transportation to all of our eligible riders and several thousand ineligible riders, but we aren't providing services to all the students who need them, and that's the problem.
Well, we're a community that doesn't have neighborhood schools. We also have a school choice program, so people choose schools that may not be as close to their homes. You have sibling situations where you have a student, one sibling at a school, another. People talk about the fact that some of the buses go around about and they see them and they're not full. So yes, there's that whole eligibility thing, but like you said, we have a rich history of transporting all the students to the schools.
That's right.
And we're not doing that now. Is that the intention still between now and the end of the year, or is this a status quo for the rest of the year?
Well, we're trying to turn over every possible stone to fix this, right? So we have provisions in the contract we have with our vendor, which is NRT, and the contract allows for us to sort of sub-bid out the additional drivers. So if, for example, they can't provide all 77, provide 57, well, we can subcontract out the remaining balance. The problem is that most vendors have the same challenge of drivers. So no one's prepared to bid on a job that they also can't fulfill. And so it is a national shortage of drivers. We're feeling that, of course, in Framingham as well. So we're trying to reach out to the extent that we can to find drivers, and they're really not coming to us. And so that's part of the Metro West Regional Transportation Authority is helping us. The MWRTA, to the extent the law allows them to transport students, we are transporting students using that system as well.
So we have districts like Lawrence and Worcester and Chelsea and Boston who say that right now they are all fully staffed with buses.
It's puzzling to me. It's great. I want to know how they did it. We actually are talking with some of those, and Worcester has moved their transportation to in-house. There's some conversations we're having here. Are we better off to run in our own in-house busing? That happened sometime before I became superintendent. We had that, and by the time I came here, it was already a contracted service. But there is some question, is that better? Are people more inclined to work for the city than they are for a private vendor? So there's some discussions that are happening now as we look to study this further. But I don't know how Boston runs 700 plus drivers and they have all the seats filled. I think it's fantastic, but whatever they're doing, we need to follow that.
Yeah, Marlborough's in that same situation, and I named a few of the other districts. And one of the parents I spoke to mentioned to me that, when one of the Green Line or the Orange Line or something breaks down in Boston, they see, lines of buses brought in to help people get where they need to go. And so the point that was being made was, well, there's buses available for that. Why aren't those buses available in Framingham? Is it a priority, or is it just something that we're looking to the future for? Are we really working on changing it now? And I think that I'd really love it if you could just say whether or not that's something that every day you're looking at, or is it something that it's going to stay this way for the end of the year and you're looking at longer term?
No, there's a multifold process. So we're pressing our vendor provide the drivers, and we're making sure that they're recruiting drivers appropriately. What are they doing to increase the numbers in the pipeline? Because there's that long, if you're trying to get brand new drivers, you have to go through the CDL training and all the course of study and the hours on the road. So you're looking to get, we've incentivized this for referral bonuses. Even if you're a staff member of the district, we'll give you a referral bonus if you get us a bus driver. So there's all kinds of incentives at play. In addition to that, we've exhausted all of the possible coaches that would serve Framingham, the motor coaches. I personally called the Boston Duck Boats when we were nearing that strike that had happened sometime in the past. And turns out Boston Duck Boats don't come to Framingham. They don't leave Boston. But we thought it'd be kind of it's an example, although an extreme one, of the number of rocks we turned over to try to solve this problem. So capitalizing on all the infrastructure that we have. And now the question becomes, how do we get more drivers here? How is NRT, the vendor, providing the level of contracted service? So we're not satisfied saying it is what it is. We are continuing to press this every day.
I guess what we're seeing happening in the neighborhoods is that parents are forming carpools. It's affecting work schedules. It's affecting just the surety of getting kids to school on time. Kids are getting there late sometimes because the buses are doing multiple routes. It's definitely a pressing issue that comes up when you ask people what's on your parents who have kids in the schools, what's on your mind. It seems to be one of the most prevalent issues. I think people are not coming out in droves because they don't feel like it's going to make a difference, but they are unhappy with the current situation. So it would be helpful, I think, for them to know if the efforts are continuing. And I think one of the things that came up that I should ask you about is this subcontracting. NRT in the contract says that you can get reimbursed if you bring in other buses to pick the kids up and do the transportation that they can't provide, that they will reimburse the district for that.
That's correct.
Have we tried that?
Oh yeah, but again, it goes back to, are there other vendors to provide the services? And what we're finding, the answer to that is no, not consistently. We can't find a consistent vendor provider, at least not that we've looked at. And we've tried it, we put it out to, there's a public bidding process, right? You just can't call your best friend and say, hey, can you drive kids to school? There's a bid process to do this. We bid it first at 20 buses, we bid it then at 10 buses, then we bid it at 2 buses, and still no one's taking the bids to support our need at Framingham. So it's a frustrating problem for us. It's not a question of the money, the cost savings. We have the money to pay those services. We can't attract the drivers, and I say we, the vendor that's providing it, can't attract those drivers.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like you said, it used to be in-house and then it was contracted out. It was contracted out because having it in-house required payment of benefits, and those benefits were increasing at a very rapid rate, health insurance and all the other things that were provided to bus drivers. And so there was a thought that, maybe it'll save money. It doesn't sound like it's saved a lot of money, and it sounds like it's causing more challenges.
It's causing some more challenges for us. But we continue to press this, and we appreciate all that parents are doing to carpool. We recognize that we have students that are not coming to school because of it. And so we reach out to those families, we reach out to those students. We're tracking that data, and it's impactful.
You're going to have that data for some kids. You're not going to have it on other kids. Getting kids to school is always to come to school, not transported to school, but to come to school has also been a challenge in Framingham because you have a lot of working families, that you have families that are less involved in the schools because so much focus has to be on work and other responsibilities. And getting kids to school sometimes being a challenge becomes an impediment for them even attending. So let me ask you this. You have Framingham was featured in that Globe article where all the other districts it talked about the other districts having sufficient busing and Framingham not having it. Now you have a surplus because you're obviously not spending all this money on busing that's in the budget. So what happens to that surplus and how big is it?
Off the top of my head, I don't know that surplus is a daily rate that happens, so we'll have to contract other, like we run into some shortfalls with transporting students for athletic events, right? So if we don't have drivers for that, they'll have to contract those out. So it all does, we can get those numbers to you, but in the end, it would all go back, it would fall back to the available funds to the city. But that is part of a contract, so yeah, we're prepared to spend that money for contracted services and bill that back to the vendor. So if we're not spending that money, that's true. Like I said, it's not a money problem.
It's not a money problem.
It's a driver problem.
Right, but at the end of the school year, there will probably be a multi-million-dollar surplus if we're not fully busing all the students as budgeted.
That's correct.
You don't want that, do you?
Of course not.
I mean,
it's not I don't want any.
Would you have to turn that surplus back to the city?
We would turn it. Yeah, we'd have to. Yeah, it's not as though we're going to find something new to spend it on. We have money allocated for transportation, and that's what we're doing. But and I hope this situation it finds its way to some resolve. I hope another vendor can come out and put a bid forward, and that we can pay them to provide the shortfall of services. In the meanwhile, we're trying to make sure that on our buses that we have every seat full, and if there are families that have the bus privilege that don't need it, that we can give those seats to someone else. But then, when you have full buses, it creates other challenges. You have bus behaviors, right? If you have 3 kids on a seat on a bus, that's pretty close for comfort, you know? And that creates, get out of my way, get out of my way. And then now you have a driver, then you have this sort of behavioral situations they can erupt and do on school buses. So we think that the best possible fix would be to have the number of buses that we've contracted for. And if we had that, we would have many less complaints and concerns from families.
If you can get reimbursed for hiring another company, and NRT can't meet the needs right now, how aggressive is the effort right now to get more buses in it?
It's every day. We work on this problem every single day. We have records of all the calls we've made, the bids that we've put out. It's all public record. We've been working at this problem for years, not just now, since the pandemic. And this happened over 2 different transportation providers. This happened previously with Durham and now with NRT. And we were paying even then an assurance, like many companies were paying their employees, to say, at some point school's going to restart, and when it does, we need to make sure we have drivers at the ready. And then school restarted and the drivers weren't at the ready, and that problem persisted.
Do these other districts that we mentioned, like Chelsea and Worcester and Marlborough and Boston, do they have in-house or contract?
Some have moved, like Worcester just recently moved after several years of a transition to more in-house. And I don't know Boston's system and some of the others. Marlborough is working with NRT. So, our question, of course, is if you're providing the drivers there, why aren't you providing drivers to Framingham?
Good question. Did you get an answer to that yet?
No, we continue to press them.
Yeah.
And for the interested public who want to watch this, we have updates on this every school committee agenda. So every other Wednesday, it's a topic, it's a standing item, and then every other meeting, NRT comes to the table.
Okay.
And they give us an update on their progress.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate, and I do apologize to everybody who's impacted by that. We are really trying.
Yeah, we want to get those kids to school for sure. And one of the other things that keeps coming up in the conversations is the school calendar. I was surprised. The school calendar kept coming up, and a parent pointed out to me that with school starting the last week in August, there has not been 1 week yet where there have been 5 days of school. That the first week this school year, where there will be 5 consecutive days of school, is the last week of October that goes into the first week of November. And so I went and looked at the school calendar, and to me it looked like maybe 9 weeks of the entire school year are going to have 5 full school days. So one of the issues that came up with, we're challenged with getting our kids to school, and then on top of that, the school calendar, where we have all these early release days and all these conferences and all these holidays and everything, the way it's set up, it's making it very hard for working families to manage around the school calendar. I know in September there was a very hot day, and so the schools were closed the night before because there was no air conditioning in the school and it was going to be very hot. And all these closures and this inconsistency in terms of having the kids in school consistently on 5 days a week is affecting working families. Now it's more common in Framingham to have, both parents working or whole families working, and maybe more than one job each. So when you combine the school calendar challenges with the busing, it's making it a little difficult. What about the school calendar and the way that it is in terms of the conferences, et cetera? Is there any possibility that can be revisited to make it more friendly or more accommodating to working families?
Yeah, it's a great question. So just to, again, to set the stage for that, there's 180 school days that are required
Right.
under the law.
Right, that's a law. That's a legal requirement.
Yeah, so you have 180 days. And so when you have certain days that are federal holidays that are observed, or you have schools that have religious observances, depending on the community, you know, some have moved into no religious holidays. You go to school, and then if you choose to celebrate a religious holiday, you take the day and you're excused.
Right.
That works, but what happens if you take, let's just take Good Friday as an example. Let's say we took Good Friday off the calendar and made that a school day. Well, families who may choose to observe Good Friday and staff alike may take the day off, but then what happens if we don't have enough staff?
Right. I think the holidays are generally understood more than the early release days and the parent conferences, the number of them.
But they do play a role into the overall
They do,
extension
of
that,
course.
right? Because then you get into those.
Because they're required and
Right. Well, then you get into the hot days. You mentioned, like, you know,
Right.
with climate change and things that are shifting, someday you can't predict day to day. Today's summer, yesterday was winter, right? And so that's another challenge for us. Also, professional development. You can't just do all your professional development before the start of the school year. There's things that come up along the way, or parent conferences. You know, we want parents to engage with families about their students' learning. And how does that happen? You know, there has to be time allowed. There are contractual implications. So one way to get it, what you're describing, is through discussions with the teachers union, which we're going to do this year.
Great.
And we're trying to map out a 3-year calendar. I'm going to propose that we have a 3-year so people can plan and forecast that. There's certain things we don't know yet, right? We don't know snow days.
Right, we don't know snow days, obviously. You don't know the weather-related issues or issues, you know, things that are out of your control. But of course, parent-teacher conferences also, we're in a more virtual society now. You know, maybe things can be, I mean, one of the suggestions that I heard was that maybe parents don't have to physically be there. Maybe there can be more virtual meetings with teachers, making it easier that way. Are you thinking about those things?
For sure, and we do some of that. We know that many of our families can't get to our schools. So that's a lesson learned from the pandemic. But the other side, the balance to that, is you have to think about the contractual obligations, right? There's a cost to doing business. And to say, we'll have a full day of school and then the teachers can just talk to me at night. Okay, that's true, and maybe that's true, but that's got to be negotiated. That's a conversation of a contract. That's not just a practice that we can just automatically put into place. So I guess there needs to be some appreciation of the nuance to a calendar. But at the same time, I do hear that feedback. We want to have full school weeks. We want to have predictable weeks. We don't want to have, and some of the thinking is, can we give families a long weekend? Is that more advantageous than having Wednesdays in the middle of the week off? At least the family can plan for a long weekend. And maybe for some, that becomes a little getaway. Not for everybody, but maybe it does. Our staff would still be working. So it's a really difficult, so this year we have a calendar committee. We've had one in the past, by the way, with teachers and administrators and some staff. This year I'm inviting some students who also voiced some concern about the calendar, and I've invited them to join us in the discussion. So it's one we're taking up. It's one that will also be part of our contract negotiations, and hopefully a multi-year calendar will allow families to be sort of on notice as to how it's going to look. I always worry about the days pushing into June because it starts to heat up, the buildings get hot, and we don't want our kids in schools. Not all of our schools are air conditioned, about 70%.
Can you make an investment in that?
Yeah, but you know, look at the lead time on that. We did this at McCarthy 2 years ago. We're still waiting to finalize the install. So you can't just snap your fingers and have the air conditioning on.
Everything's so slow.
It's slow. It's a huge structure. You know, why they build schools in the northeast and don't put air conditioning in there. You know, you'd never have a school in the south.
No, it doesn't make sense. You're absolutely right.
So it's an infrastructure consideration, but yeah, these are some of the complications that I'm sure people are frustrated about. But anytime someone wants to reach out to me and have a discussion about it, let this be an invitation. Reach out to me. I'm easy to talk to, I think. Have a conversation. I'll let you know what I know. And I don't have all the answers, but I'm happy to hear feedback.
So do you like people to email you, or how do you like them to contact you?
Yeah, I always respond to my emails. They can email me, set up a meeting, have a coffee, whatever, just talk. And raise questions. What's on people's minds?
What's the best email for people to use?
Right on the website. I mean, it's a long email address.
Oh,
so
the framing,
R. Tremblay at framingham.k12.ma.us. But if you just go onto the website, just look up, or just go on
We're going to put
Google.
it up on the screen. We have the website, Framingham.
Just click on my email me. Say, I want to talk to you about the school calendar. I don't think it works for my family. Can we talk about it? Anything you want to talk about. I'll share what I know and take feedback.
Let's talk a little bit about the discussions about building another school on the south side of Framingham. We just spent nearly $100 million with a lot of state aid. Wasn't on the backs of fully on the backs of Framingham taxpayers on the Fuller Middle School, but now, which is on south of Route 9. Now there's the taking of the Bethany property. I think the purchase, $9 million, something like that, to start planning for a South Side school.
That's right.
How much is that actually going to cost, do you think, and how much would we end up getting? Would the city end up getting for that versus another debt exclusion?
Yeah, those are great questions. Difficult to put a number into the universe because that number is likely to change. Construction costs have escalated at tenfold what the inflation rate is, and it's hard to predict. And so I wouldn't want to put a number there. I can tell you that it will be likely more than what the what Fuller cost, because that was multiple years ago now. We have an application in with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the MSBA, and that is the funding authority through the state that helps with these projects, as you mentioned. They used to be paying, back when I started in my career earlier on, they were paying 85-95% on the dollar, like 95 cents on the dollar. And we're probably going to be more like around 50, 60 cents on the dollar, depending on where it lands.
So how great is the need? Is the enrollment increasing? Is it going to be an elementary or K through 12, or what would you envision it being, and what would, what's the enrollment?
So we need another school on the south side. Really, we want to, the buses you mentioned before about traveling everywhere, going around, we really need to create more south side presence of our schools. And once upon a time, there were more. Those have all been since converted, enrollment shifted. But you have a preponderance of congregate housing, apartment housing, and those kinds of spaces on the south side, but most of the schools that we have are either central or north. And we're busing students too, which explains. In fact, some parents even choose a school in the school choice program so that they have an hour ride for their child either way because they have to get to work. It's almost like this, let's find the school that's the farthest point so I can have my child sort of cared for on the way to school every day. And that's a reality too.
People are trying to balance a lot of different things.
They are, and I don't blame them for it. But having a school that's in proximity to where you live is also a nice thing to do for our families and for our kids. So what's envisioned here is a 1-5 elementary school and a pre-KK center.
What's a 1-5?
Grades 1 through 5.
Oh, grades 1 through 5. No kindergarten?
No, we're envisioning as a shift to pre-KK centers and taking kindergarten ultimately in the long term out of the schools.
So where would the pre-KK centers be?
So the pre-KK center, the first of its kind, would be on the south side property. You have an elementary school 1 through 5 and a pre-KK center, an early childhood center.
So that would be two buildings, or all in the same?
I'm not sure the actual structure, how that would look, or it's adjoined, a shared building.
Same location.
Same location, though. But it would that way it would free up some of our other spaces. We have a lot of our schools that are using long, outdated, temporary modular units that are attached to buildings that are 20, 30 years.
You have schools right now using modulars?
Oh yeah.
Which ones?
Potter Road, for example, Hemingway. With Hemingway's the first school to come up, but we have a number of our schools that are, building out this way or had to, and just keeping these structures, which are not ideal. We have classes that are happening in renovated locker rooms, closets. They're not the right spaces for teaching and learning. And so one of the advantages would be over time is to have kindergarten move out of that space, free up some of the room in those buildings, and then give our students that experience. So that Southside School application is in. We'll wait to hear from the School Building Authority, hopefully in the next month or so, and we'll know whether or not we're invited into the capital pipeline. And when that happens, then we'll have a discussion in the community about how that will look.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about IEPs. Some of the topics that came up in discussion were around, the conversations, I should say, that came up in discussions with parents were about kids, the lack of programs for certain kids, especially in our district, more focus on kids with dyslexia, how they've taken off of IEPs before their reading reaches the right level. I'm wondering, over the years, there's been a lot of discussion about a program for kids with dyslexia. Is there? And there was the same amount of discussion years ago about a program for autism, children with autism. Has there been any thought about building a program for children with dyslexia the way that the district did for children with the autism?
Yeah, I'd have to check with our special education department on that really specific nuanced question, but I can tell you that in our population of students, we have some remarkable programming across our schools that we've created, and one of the areas that we had to improve was that some of the programs were put in, like the Autism Spectrum Disorder program, ASD, was put into a school, and then it didn't feed to the right middle school. So parents had raised to us several years back, part of the pandemic, in fact, was students would lose their peer groups. They would be in a school A and they would go on to instead of all the peers going to the middle school, these students would then go on to a different middle school, and that was disjointed. So we've since had to rework that puzzle so that students could move with their peer groups. We've made some important fixes, I think, in special education. As far as dyslexia, there are classroom-based models to that. I'm not aware of the specific IEP concern that you raised, but certainly if there are families that have that concern, there are a couple of pathways. One, they can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to answer those questions with a little bit more detail once I understand the question.
Yeah.
And then also through our Special Education Parent Advisory Council, we have a dedicated group.
People are hearing you suggest reaching out, and hopefully,
I hope they do.
So 2 other quick questions. So I'll ask you for quick responses if you don't mind.
No.
So we received federal recovery money during COVID. The money from the government. How was that money that was given to the district during COVID used?
So it depends. There was different kinds of buckets, if you will, for that. Everything was used from supplies, air filtration systems, HEPA upgrades,
Any left?
upgrades. I think most of those are spent down to what they were allocated for. The last thing we want to do is return federal money that was given to us. So,
Yeah.
Again, I never know what you're going to ask me at these meetings. So I never know to bring you numbers, and I haven't committed all those to memory. But we do report that out to the school committee at meetings on the recovery monies as to how they're being spent. But we have a forecast by 27 to have those spent out.
Well, next time you come when I want specifics, I will make sure I get
let
that
me
to
know.
you in advance.
And I
And
can-
one more quick question.
Sure.
You're halfway through your 6-year contract.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm in year 4 of that now.
For year 4?
I'm in year 4, I believe.
You're one of the few superintendents in Massachusetts with a 6-year contract. What are your thoughts? You're at year 4.
Yeah. Well, here's what I think. You want to know what I think? I think I'd like to stay in this community as I promised when I first interviewed for the job, that I wanted to stay here to see the class of 2030 graduate, right? That group is now in grade 6. So I'd like to stay here until 2030 and then hand the reins off to somebody else. I think districts, if they have leaders that they have confidence in, if that's the case here, I don't know, but I would hope. And I think school districts generally are moving toward longer contracts for superintendents. I'm seeing that from my colleagues because the churn rate is so high. A typical shelf life of a superintendent is 2.7 years, not even finishing out a 3-year contract. And that's for a variety of reasons, right? But my heart has been and continues to be in Framingham. I'd love to serve this community. I hope I can serve it until 2030. I hope they'll keep me. But from my view of that, if you have a superintendent, you have leaders that you can retain them, because to find somebody else, it's just going to be you're never going to move that needle forward. It's always what's the new soup of the day.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you so much. I should have had you for a full hour, which I'll do next time. I think I've said that before.
Sure.
But we could go on. There's so many more topics. Thank you.
I do like the surprises. He always keeps it eventful and real and honest.
Thank you so much for being here today. I always want to be very thankful to Dr. Tremblay. You know, people always appreciate the opportunity to hear directly from the superintendent. And for those of you looking for more information, as you heard, you're always welcome to raise your issues and address concerns at the school committee meetings and to reach out to Superintendent Tremblay. And you can attend those meetings in person or by Zooming in. The schedule of meetings along with Zoom links and the recordings of past meetings are available at www.framingham.k12.ma.us. Go to that site and then click on School Committee. And if you do want to reach out to Dr. Tremblay's office, go to the same website, but click on About Us at the top and then click on Superintendent. My next guest coming up is Phil Ottaviani. He's the chair of the Framingham City Council, District 6 City Councilor. We'll be right back.
The impact of a meal goes well beyond feeding our bodies. Because when people are fed, futures are nourished. Everyone deserves to live a full life. And with your help, together we can end hunger. Join the movement at feedingamerica.org/actnow.
It's important to get a flu shot each and every year because flu viruses are constantly changing and immunity from the vaccine decreases over time. Flu vaccines are updated annually to work against that year's viruses. The best time to get your shot is in the fall, but getting it later can still help. Getting a flu shot lowers your risk of getting sick, And if you do happen to get flu, it's likely to be less severe.
Phil Ottaviani is the City Councilor for District 6, and he's also the chair of the Framingham City Council. All councilors are up for re-election in November, and he and 7 other councilors are running unopposed. So it's a third 2-year term for Phil, beginning on January 1st. It's so nice to have you here, Phil. Thanks so much for coming back. You've been here before, and I appreciate you coming back to talk about some of the issues that are on people's minds and that people love to hear about. And I think first and foremost, as you wind down your second term and head into your third, what do you think is working well on the City Council, and what do you think should be improved?
I think we're doing a good job. I think, you know, the relationships, the City Council has a good relationship. All the councils do with the mayor and the administration. Open door policy with the mayor's office.
Now, you say all the councilors. Is that true?
It is true.
Okay.
Yeah, he said all the councilors have access to him.
Okay.
They can
Good.
call. He reaches out. He reaches back. It is all the councilors. If they respond and they reach out to him, he promised that in the very beginning, and he's held to that word. And some people don't take him up on that as much. I do, and I know a few others do. But we have like bi-weekly meetings to go over different things, the mayor and myself.
Okay.
And you know, we have some excellent department heads. I think.
But the council itself, you know, are there things that you think you as a council can
Yeah, I
improve?
I think the way we treat everybody, you know, and the department heads, you know, they're professionals. They need to do their job. They don't need city councilors calling them up and asking them, you know, you need this follow protocol. You know what I mean? And we have some folks that do things a little bit differently. But I think the city council as a whole is working well. When I ran back, this will be my 5th year coming up in January because I'm unopposed. You know, we wanted to keep Framingham affordable. We wanted to do certain things. We needed a new school. We needed a lot of things. And we've made a lot of promises, and we've kept those promises over the last 4 years that I've been around.
So if there was anything you could change or fix and make better on the council, what do you think it would be?
I think the appointments process has been well. I've been the chairman of the appointment process. I think we could maybe provide more background material and let the councilors see maybe who applied for the jobs or the volunteer positions, because we get the name sent to us and we only get the name to vote. The
Well,
mayor,
you know, that's been an issue since we became a city.
no question about it.
Years ago, people were saying, we want to see everyone who applied, and we want to see the people you rejected as well as the people that you're putting forward.
Correct.
So you think that should...
I think in the background material we should know if there were 4 or 5 people that applied for the spot and who the mayor chose and who the other folks were. And I think that's something they're willing to do, the administration.
So is that a change in the charter that you would...
No, that's not a change in the charter. It's
not,
just more
just a process?
transparency. It would be just a process. And the problem is, in that citizens participation officer job, we've had 3 folks doing that job. We haven't had any continuity doing that job, and each person's done it a little bit differently. The current person is doing a good job, but you know, it's a very detailed position. You can't put out people's private information. You have to be very careful in what you put out to the general public. But you can put names and you can say, you know, 4 or 5 folks applied for the job, and this is the person we're moving
And
forward.
what difference do you think that would make going forward?
I think some of the folks on the council would like to see who the other names are and who the folks are that applied. You know, the mayor, that's what happened when we became a city. The mayor, whoever the mayor is at that time, they have the ultimate decision and the ultimate authority to pass the name on to the city council. The appointments committee vets, you know, who comes to us, but it's only the person that comes to us, then we refer it to the full city council. So it's a pretty straightforward process. We either say yes or we say no. And there's not too often we've said no. In my term, maybe been twice.
You might say no more if you see everybody who applies.
You could possibly. It could be a possibility.
Okay. One of the things that was supposed to happen when Framingham first became a city was that the city council was supposed to hire an auditor.
Yes.
That still hasn't happened.
Yep. Very important position. You need checks and balances. And the problem is we couldn't get anybody for the position. It's one of the pet peeves of the Finance Committee. George King and Adam Steiner and John Stefanini, I believe, are 3 of the members on that committee now. And we wanted an auditor for checks and balances, and we haven't been able to hire a person for that position. I don't know if it's because of money or what it's because of, but it gets brought up and it gets asked, and then they just transfer the money to something else, and the money gets used for something else.
You know, where there's a will, there's a way, right?
There is.
So hopefully after 5 years now of being a city,
Yeah.
that'll be
I think
something.
this charter review is important, what we're going through right now, because there are some things, you know, they could be changed.
So Coming up in November, next election, and with 3 seats being contested, all the other councilors are heading into their next term. Why do you think only 3 seats are contested?
You'd like to think they think we're all doing a great job, but I think people truly believe.
You would like to think that.
You'd like to think
Yes.
that. And I think over the last couple of years, and I think things have gone well for the entire city. I think we've moved forward, and there is a better working relationship with the city council and the administration. I think it was a little challenged the first 4 years as we were a city. I only was on the council for 2 of those 4 years. I had lost that first election to Mike Rossi. But it's people, they go on these social media sites and they see city councilors being bashed. They see other people being dragged through the mud. And you need tough skin. You need tough skin. It's the families that it hurts. My wife gets upset. I'm accustomed to it, if you know what I mean. People have something to say, they can say it to me. I don't like this anonymous stuff. I wish somebody would just be able to have to put their name to something they have to say. And
be accountable. If you're going to say something,
if you're going to say it, be accountable.
Be accountable.
People have never said they don't know where I stand. You know what I mean? I am accountable, and everybody always knows where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of that, that kind of ties into how the council conducts itself. There was talk, I think, in the first 2 years of having a city council, of having a code of conduct. I think there may have even been a draft or a code of conduct, but adopted. But you can have rules, but if you don't have teeth to those rules, they don't mean anything.
Correct.
Is that something that you, as chair, think we need and think that the city council should pursue?
Yes, I do. It's something we've talked about. It's something that's still on the to-do list. Most folks that are in this position should know what's expected of them and how they should act and behave. I served on the zoning board for 21 years. You had strict ethics rules and things like that. And on the city council, it's just, if everybody has a mutual respect for everybody and a mutual respect for the administration and all our department heads and all the team members in the city of Framingham, it works a lot better. Mm-hmm. You wait for a meeting and then you want to bash somebody. The other guy and somebody or a gal in another department says that's how you're going to treat your department heads or your division heads, and it doesn't leave for a warm feeling, a warm fuzzy feeling.
Right.
And they need to be treated
properly.
Appreciate the people that work for the city.
And it comes from a lot of different angles. One of them you talked about a moment ago when you were talking about, you have to have thick skin and you hate these anonymous things. Is there anything that can be done about any of that?
No. Well, those social media sites, there's nothing that can be done. Mm-hmm. Freedom of speech, they sit behind, we call them keyboard warriors, and they just sit behind their computer screen, they do what they want to do, and then the chips fall where they fall. And, they've gone after a lot of good people, and some of the stuff is truly inaccurate. Some of the stuff might be accurate, but some of the stuff that comes out is pretty unbelievable, and how they go after people.
We obviously want people to participate in government.
Yep.
Aside from that, there's also cost involved.
Yep.
I mean, these days, if you want to run for an at-large seat, you've got to raise a big chunk of money.
Yeah, it's citywide.
We never had that when Framingham was a town. You didn't have to raise big chunks of money, but if you're going to run for an at-large seat, you got to be able to raise maybe like 50 grand.
I don't know about.
And then you got the PACs coming in.
I don't know about 50, but a selectman's race probably to run it right was probably $25,000 or $30,000. So that was townwide. Mm-hmm. Even the district race. If you want to do a mailing in your district to a real good voter list that that you can get from the Mass Dems if you're a Dem or whatever, and get a real good voting list and a voting history list, to mail just to your district one mailing it could be $3,000 between printing and mailing, and that's just one mailing to one district.
Right.
And we have, as we know, 9 districts in Framingham, and and I had done a mailing before. My district changed, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. But I tried to be proactive because my district, I lost 50 to 60% of my district.
Well, let's talk about that. How did that happen? I mean, I saw some streets that got moved from districts that blows my mind. I can't even, and the lines go like this, and they make no sense at all.
Audrey, makes no sense. I'm still talking to myself because I represented precinct 11 for 25 years as a town meeting member. Sat there with you, and we had a lot of fun. I sat in the back row. They said we were the table that caused all the commotion, but it was a great camaraderie.
You had good snacks back
there. We
there.
had great snacks, and we were the table. And all of a sudden, with this redistricting, I lost probably 55 to 60% of my district that I represented, and I lost my own father on Salem End Road, Dave Mignani on Cherioka. My district starts on half a Singletary Lane now and goes across Route 9 to the Village Hall, to Auburn Street. I never crossed Route 9 before. I shouldn't say I never did. I had Kathy McCay, I had a little bit of Westgate.
You had some part
and
of it's 10,
I had a
precinct
little
10.
bit precinct 10 and all the apartments. But this redistricting, District 8 picked up a huge chunk of my district and District 5. And then I picked up some of District 3. It was,
Who did that?
it's the legislature, and the city clerk wasn't really involved with it until after the fact. We changed a couple streets, but there wasn't much we could change.
I remember the city clerk, though, bringing some recommendations forward.
She did. We moved one street from, it was Caesar's district, District 2. They took one street that was been in District 2 forever. They moved it over to District 1, and they moved a few streets around. But that was the only extent of what we did, because it involves continuity, that there has to be X amount of voters in each district at somewhere approaching 4,000.
So are you saying that legislators on Beacon Hill literally sat there and decided, I'm going to move this street and this street, one street at a time, with nobody from the community giving them any input at all?
No community input, and I know Jack Lewis tried, but with the census and the way it worked out, the precincts have to be connected. The precincts in the district connected. And if you look at District 6 now, it just wiggles all the way down. Half of Fountain Street goes up, Jody Road, and then we go all the way across Route 9 to Auburn Street. You have 3 city councilors in District 6. You have Councilor Liam Bruno, who lives on Ellis Street now. You have Councilor King on Auburn Street, and myself. So the 2 at-large councilors are from District 6, as we sit here today.
That was one of the issues that was talked about during the charter, was that you could end up with 3 councilors from one district.
Yep, and this has happened in this case. But we do have true district representation.
Yeah.
Because, you look at these south side precincts that never or were underrepresented, now they have a voice, which is important. That's one of the good things that have come out of the charter.
Let's talk, since we're talking about districts, I want to talk for a minute about Knobscot.
Yep.
There's a whole effort to rezone a big chunk of Knobscot up at Edmonds and Edgell. What are your thoughts about that?
The neighbors, we haven't seen a plan. We've heard about a plan. We need to see something. And the city council, we need to be sensitive to the neighbors' concerns and work with the neighborhood, because something eventually will go there. But they need to craft what's going to go there between them, the property owners, and however it's going to play out. And as of now, there's nothing in front of the city council. There was going to be something. It never came.
They had a big meeting. They showed all kinds of photographs of what they wanted to do.
And then you hit 10-story buildings. You hit thousands of apartments. There's no rhyme or reason to what they're talking about. You can go on some different websites.
They want to change the zoning.
They want to incorporate the Knobscot Village zoning for this parcel that's already in existence, and this chunk was kept out. And I'm sure for good reasons.
So the zoning that was approved for across the street,
for B4 and next
they
door,
want to adopt that for this parcel,
Correct.
but this parcel has totally separate zoning. So
right now, it's
right now.
it's what it was before.
So
but if you
do
read
you
our master plan,
this
piece was supposed to be included in the village district. So it's kind of interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
A lot of opposition to that.
A lot of opposition.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just wondering whether you think it has any legs.
I think when we see the plan, we'll see where it plays out. We do need housing in Framingham, but what kind of housing do we need? We need for sale housing. Downtown, we've put enough apartments in downtown to last a lifetime, in my opinion.
Well, that zoning was supposed to be revisited.
When
is that going to be
we
revisited?
did a moratorium, and maybe it's time to revisit that and do another moratorium. But Waverly Street, it stops on Mellon Street, the zoning, and Saki's working on doing something down the other end of Waverly Street. But that hasn't come forward yet. And
I think what nobody expected with the transit-oriented development was that so many of the older homes would become multifamily. But you have the right. You're the zoning authority, the council.
Right. Oh yeah.
To sit on it all these years afterwards doesn't make sense, right? It can come up.
We've talked about apartments, and we did that moratorium for a small period of time. Framingham has to be open for business. However, I stood up on town meeting floor. I was all in favor of putting bodies in downtown to revitalize downtown.
Right.
But I raised my hand and said, these people are going to be going to Whole Foods and to Market Basket, and they're not walking and they're not taking a bike. So I'm a firm believer that every bedroom needs a parking spot. And I've said
parking is always an issue.
And now they're drifted into the neighborhoods
never
now.
enough parking.
Never enough parking.
Never enough parking. Totally agree with that.
You look at the Bancroft downtown,
Yeah.
and it's probably one of the premier locations overlooking Farm Pond. And if you're up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, there's 40 cars in the Loring Arena parking lot that don't belong there from those
that's
residents.
interesting.
And that's not right.
So when we talk about downtown, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges.
Yep.
Business owners, developers talk about their businesses, their properties being affected by the larger homeless population.
Yep.
And really then you talk to the police and the police say that they're not breaking any laws.
Right.
But then you talk to developers and they say, well, I own property in other communities and there the police help me. They move the people, but they're not moving them in Framingham.
Oh, they all get moved to downtown Framingham.
Yeah, so what can be done to make it better? Because obviously we have a lot of social services also, and people come here for social services.
Which is important.
But we've been talking, Framingham's been talking about the same issue for decades. Is anything ever going to be able to happen to make it better?
It's not called community policing, but the police chief's finally come up with a formula, and we're going to fund him. We've already talked about it, and it's going to be involved with the social service agencies and different folks working in downtown. The challenge population downtown, you're talking maybe 15 or 20 people that cause most of the commotion. It's not 50 or 100 people.
Okay.
I'm very familiar with the situation. We had a friend of ours.
Probably know who most of the people are also,
Right.
so the police do,
Yeah,
right?
They do. And I watched it for 13 years. I got him into housing, to a shelter with SMOC. We got him different things, but some folks just choose a lifestyle and they can't get away from it.
Right.
And Shane lost his life. It'll be a year, October 11th. And it is a challenge. You've got businesses downtown that are fearful. You've got a woman that runs a hairdressing salon. She has to lock her door when the clients come and go because somebody came in there with a broken bottle and threatened her. It's not good. It's not a good look for downtown Framingham.
And yet it's a thriving downtown
it's a
compared to
thriving-
years ago.
It's thriving.
But
and
these issues come with density, don't they?
no question about it.
In any dense community.
No
But
question about it. But they need services and they need help. We've got this opioid task force money, and I've been screaming about it. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the money needs to be put on the street. We need to use this money to help these folks. I don't care if it's getting them housing.
how will it help? What do you think they can
Well,
use with with the money?
You can first get them into treatment. You can get them into housing. You can get them to halfway houses. Some of these people are living in
But
tents.
then more people come. Like, will it ever end?
I think it will. I think sooner or later, the more, you bring more bodies in, people scatter. If you go downtown, the panhandling and that ordinance we passed about running in and out of the streets, it's gotten better. It's not as bad as it was, but you still have 3 or 4 people down there every day doing the panhandling.
Well, that's true, and except when you come off the Mass Pike into Framingham over by the Natick exit,
They're there.
I mean, they're there.
They're
It's
there.
not a good look.
No, I was at
for
Lowe's
coming right
today.
into
They were right
Framingham.
on the median at Lowe's, across the
So
street.
is the panhandling ordinance working?
They're giving tickets, but how are you going to collect from
They
these
gave
folks?
tickets?
They give tickets. They do give tickets. But how? I saw Lieutenant Wareham, Harry Wareham, the other day on Route 30, parked his cruiser. The lights were on. He's dressed in his street clothes, giving a citation. But they're still there, and it's a challenge for them, and they can only do so much because everybody has their civil liberties and their rights. But Framingham, I think, with us giving a TIF, with Seabra coming downtown, I think we need to revitalize Framingham, and it needs a little bit more. We put in all these apartments, but we never got a Starbucks. We never, I say Starbucks or a Pete's Coffee. We got a couple restaurants. We have Jack's Abbey. We have Fave de Cow. We have Brazilian steakhouses. We have Terra Brazils. We have some great restaurants.
Sofa Cafe left.
Sofa Cafe left.
Yeah.
And now there's a sushi place there. And
I've heard good things.
it is, but it's a challenge to operate in downtown Framingham because at night, a lot of people still have the perception it's not a safe place to visit.
Right.
And, it's well lit, but when you start to have to hit the side streets, it's very non-welcoming.
Well, I hope that, the city council, the mayor can work together, making some inroads here. The police, let's talk a little bit about the police.
Yep.
Obviously, they have things they can do and things they can't do. Right now, though, one of the biggest things that's happening with the Framingham police is this movement towards body cams.
Yep.
Right? I saw over $2 million going towards packages of equipment and software and everything else to start.
I think it's 200,000 is the trial part of it is 200,000. We were
I saw
applying
that
for a grant.
Axos company was I thought it was 2.2 million.
I think the whole program's in that package, but I
Right.
think the trial program's a couple hundred
So
thousand.
there's a trial first,
We're doing a trial,
but the whole program will cost.
yeah,
a
and the
lot
chief
more
is all in on this, and so aren't the city councilors.
Yeah, he's
all
been
right?
here. He's
This-
talked about it on
this
the
is
show.
This is important.
He
You know
wants
what I
to
mean?
see it happen.
And he wants the right equipment because he tells us if somebody's drawing their gun, they're going to have time to turn on their camera. We want it to work. We want the best equipment for our officers and for the citizens of Framingham, because the perception out there, Framingham police do a good job. We're lucky. Lester Baker does a great job. That truly, the former administration, I don't have a lot of praise for, as you know, but that was probably one of her better hires. Lester Baker is hands-on. It doesn't matter what community meeting you ask him to go to, what if you're having office hours or whatever you need, he makes himself available, as well as his command staff, his deputy chiefs. They're all willing to meet, and we're all on the same page, and we have their back. You know, and having their back means financially we need to give them the money they need to get the resources they need.
Did you think that having a marijuana industry would impact crime in Framingham? Do you think it has?
No, I think it's had a less intense use as we all thought it would have, but I'm done with marijuana licenses. I've been talking about this for a long time. We issued 6, then we went to 8, then we had to issue one more 9. It's like we're marijuana mile. I wanted to see them spread out and treated like liquor stores.
Why did you even go beyond 6?
Well, we had a lawsuit, so there was a lawsuit because I guess if you are a medical marijuana facility, you have first right to a retail license. And the former administration gave away a license that was supposed to go to a medical marijuana. So we were involved in litigation, or the threat of litigation. So instead of the mayor, the new administration came to us and said, we need to settle this lawsuit. Would you please give us an extra license so we have one on the shelf? And we did that. Then they had 3 or 4 applicants for the last license. One was next to the Wayside School, so it couldn't go next to a school. And they said they had 2 good applicants. And I said, why can't we expand the district? Liquor stores are all over the place. If somebody wants to buy marijuana and do marijuana legally, why should they have to go to that one strip on Route 9 or Route 30? Why not have one downtown that's not next to a school or whatever, or have one, somebody said Knobscott. You know what I mean? Why should somebody have to try to get to downtown or Route 9 to that one area to buy their marijuana? And I said we should study expanding the district. And that, we got a map. It went no farther. But I'm not in favor of issuing any more marijuana licenses. We have more than enough.
So is it capped out now?
We're capped out at 9. They have to come back to the city council, and they need 8 votes to change that district and to expand it. And a few folks on the city council are adamantly opposed to expanding it because they think it's going to go into different neighborhoods.
Okay. Now, we talked about housing and we talked about density as well. And one of the things that's been discussed at length right now is this whole thing about accessory dwelling units, ADUs, where people can actually put an extra dwelling unit on their property. Now, I know it's being sold to the public as something that will help people who have aging parents or children with disabilities, but you know that it has a lot of potential to be far more than that, and especially in a community where we've had a lot of problems with rooming houses and overcrowded houses, et cetera. So how does the city prevent that from happening and becoming an even bigger problem in adopting something like ADU zoning?
You have them in other different communities, okay? This was a huge...
but you know Framingham is very different than all of it.
No question about it. It can only go in a residential zone, so that's R1, 2, 3, or 4. We've seen, when I was on the zoning board, people would come in and they need a variance. And to give them a variance, it's a far stretch to give them that unit for somebody if they have a disabled child and they want to keep their child close, or somebody that's older.
Why is it a far stretch? Why couldn't it be? Why couldn't it be made through the ZBA that it's not a far stretch?
Because then you're almost making it a 2-family. So by doing the ADUs, it's going to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Steve Meltz has done a great job.
So every ADU application
has to go to the Zoning Board. It will go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The property owner has to sign off, so it's actually, it can't be a rental property. It has to be a property where the homeowner lives in the property. And it can't be, you can't build a 10 by 12 shed in your backyard and say, that's my ADU. That's not gonna happen. It can't be if you own a barn on your property. If you have a garage and it's attached to your house, which we'll hear a little bit more about that tonight, but if your 2-car garage is over here and you wanted to put an apartment above your garage for your aging parent, if it's not attached to your house, you can't do it, but if it's attached to your house, you can. So this isn't a perfect scenario right now, and there is some opposition to it, but the majority of the council think we should give it a chance and let it go to the zoning board. The enforcement will be done by the building department. They can only be, I think it's 900 square feet, 2 bedrooms. There was a thought about why 2 bedrooms. They said sometimes husbands and wives don't sleep together. Somebody might snore, but if you're bringing in an aging parent, 1 bedroom would have been okay with me and 750 square feet. But
when you talk to people about it, the same concerns exist that we say other communities do it, but other communities also don't have the same issues. A lot of the same issues, like you mentioned before, with the homelessness, with panhandling, with social services, with density, with lack of parking, with all of those things that Framingham has. And I think that some of the concerns are that there's it's got to be, there's potential for a lot of abuse, and then it just has a life of its own. It takes on a life of its own, and you once the horse is out of the gate, so to speak, you can't really lock the gate again.
No question.
So that's just a concern that I've heard in terms of making sure that it's tight.
Right.
Really, really
tight. It has
tight.
to be really tight, and I think they've done a good job. Christina Johnson on the planning board, she does a great job. She's good at what she does. She's a planner in Hudson. The subcommittee on planning and zoning is led by Councilor Long. She was on the planning board forever, and she served on the zoning board with me. So those folks know zoning. And last night the planning and zoning subcommittee voted unanimously to support it. So it's coming in front of the council tonight.
Let's talk for a minute. We only have a couple minutes left. I want to just ask you about capital. Right now, the city seems to be spending a lot of money. I mean, whether it's buying the building next door, the Memorial Building, taking 9-point-something million from the property over at Bethany, Marion Building. The millions are adding up, and they're adding up really fast, because not only are there property acquisitions, but then you've got to build them out. And then you have to run them and maintain them and keep them. Where is all that money coming from?
Well, we're using a lot of the ARPA funds that...
How much is there in ARPA funds?
I want to say this, I think the last time we heard, she said there was either 16 million or could even be a little bit more. But the city of Framingham, I was a firm believer even before, that the money we got from the Fed should be spent on long-term projects, meaning let's fix some roofs, let's do things that we need to do for the city of Framingham. You know, we need a new elementary school, so especially a Southside elementary school. We need a community center. We need some things. The Memorial Building, that building next door, town meeting should have bought almost 20 years ago when my mother and Dennis Carter owned it.
Town meeting tried to buy it.
They didn't pass it at town meeting. You're absolutely correct, but that's because of who owned it. My mother and Dennis Carter. That's the reason they didn't buy it, would be my opinion. However, Paul Robshin built it. It's 16,000 feet. It's the perfect building to accommodate our memorial.
Right. No, I'm not. I don't think there's a debate over whether these purchases. It's just, where is the money coming from? What's the impact going to be on the taxpayer? Because once you make these land acquisitions, you still have to do the build out.
Right, and we're going to be okay with that. What will happen is for the new elementary school, it'll be just like the Fuller. It'll be a Fuller override, just like there'll be a new, whatever you call it, if it's going to be called the Bethany Hill School or whatever you call it.
So you're talking about another bond, a debt exclusion.
There'll be a debt exclusion when they go to
as
build the new
opposed to an
elementary.
override. Is that what you think it'll be?
That's what I think.
And what it'll be a package of all this stuff, or
I think it'll be just the school. I think the Marion High building, the purchase price, and we can put different groups in there like your hoops and homework. Invictus wants to have a little space, Boys and Girls Club. We can truly make that a real community center. I'm not sure that a swimming pool belongs there. I got to be honest with you, because Keefe Tech used to run the meets, plenty of parking. But we don't own the Keefe Tech building. So do you really want to spend $4 or $5 million on a building you don't own? That's the talk that's out there right now. But I think they're all good things. And, promises made, promises kept. Framingham needs, they built Fuller Middle School, and talk about thinking in the back ages. You had all this land, the fields. They built fields. There's no scoreboard and no stands. Well, when you go to a football game or whatever, a soccer game, you want to sit down, right? Not on the grass. Now they got some temporary stands. And we had that money, and they came in under budget. But we need those community assets. Those are truly community assets.
I think people also want to see, as much as there's so much talk about the South Side, people want to see things spread out, because right now every amenity that's been built, skate park, dog park, all community center, Washacum improvements, everything's been concentrated on the South Side.
It's true. It's making up for lost time. Though.
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is making up for lost time. But good to spread the wealth a little.
I agree with you.
All right. Well, listen, we covered a lot, and we always can talk for a long, long time. So you just have to come back.
I'm more than happy to come back. Thanks for asking again.
Thank you, because you're always so gracious about coming to talk about these things, and I never tell you in advance what we're going to talk about, and you just go with it, and I really appreciate that so much. So thank you.
I enjoy being here with you.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
City Council Chair Phil Ottaviani, he can be reached anytime at pottaviani@framinghamma.gov. Thank you so much for tuning into the Audrey Hall Show today. We learned a lot about the schools, we learned a lot about the city, and in addition to the City Council meetings, there are City Council subcommittee meetings and many other councils and committees and boards. And while it may seem difficult to stay informed, one of the best ways is to tune into the government channel. Most of the meetings are recorded so that if you can't attend in person or by Zoom, you can watch, you can listen to the recording. And to find them, you just go to framinghamma.gov, and on the left side, you click on where it says Government Channel, and then you can really stay informed about everything that's going on in the community. So thanks for tuning into the Audrey Hall Show today, where you will always learn something new.